morning, everyone, and thanks for coming to the Fargo Parking Commission meeting. We'll start with introductions, Deb.
Austin Morris, did I say Parking Commission? Or Enclave Development?
And Mike Williams, Risk Manager.
Randy Thorson, downtown business owner.
Thanks, everyone. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the order of agenda. It's a small order. We'll be hearing from Interstate Parking about the reports. And then we have the request from the Emergency Food Pantry about some of the parking issues there. And then we're going to be talking about the bylaws that staff's been working on, and we can go through that a little bit. So if
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Next item is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. And do we have a
Motion?
motion?
I move approval of the meeting. What am I supposed to say?
The minutes.
Minutes.
All right, there you go.
I'll get used to it.
It doesn't take very long.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thanks a lot. So the first item is a report from Interstate Parking. Vanessa, you're going to tell us what it's all about?
Sure will. Good morning.
Morning.
So October's financials are consistent with what we've seen all year. The transient revenue and validation revenue with over at the Civic is up from what we saw last year. Overall revenue is up 5%. At ROCO, our transient revenue was down $545 from last month, but overall transient revenue is up $71,000, so that's been good. So overall revenue over at ROCO is up 28% from last year this time.
So how are things working? Are we having any issues with the gate or any of the technology over there?
Not at ROCO.
Good. How about the rest of the lots? Are they in pretty good shape for going into winter?
They are, thanks to Nicole. She helped me get those potholes filled at 7th Street, so that's good.
Right.
With the night parking, though, I just wanted to give you a quick update. We wrote a total of 1,767 citations. Of those, 1,100 were warnings. So citations, we started writing those October 15th, so people are learning not where to park and not to park at night.
Right, so then the vast majority of those were welcome warning tickets.
Yes, they were.
It explains the rules and some of the options for where you can park longer term. Is
That's
that right?
correct.
So you've got an expanded territory now, and that's some of the discussion we're going to have later in the meeting. So how's that going? Does it feel like you are covering well and doing
Seems
okay?
to. We seem to be doing okay since we had that first month with the downtown area. That's going a little bit faster, giving us more time to spend on the outskirts.
Yeah, and then that's just it is. How many times do you get by on those outskirts? Are you getting by there twice a day?
Well, this is night parking.
No, I'm talking about daytime.
Daytime, they get out there depending on if it's a 4-hour, then maybe they get there twice. If it's, they try to get there about every 90 minutes if it's, the downtown area.
Right. And just for everybody's, audience's information, this isn't about generating traffic parking ticket revenue. It's really about managing on and off street facilities, and we don't have parking meters. Most cities do. So time zones are the way that we use to best manage those areas and still allow for street cleaning and year-round maintenance. A lot of times, we used to have a kind of lax enforcement in the summertime, and in the wintertime crack down and people go, what's going on? So we're really shooting for year-round enforcement in ways that help us manage those resources, and also to help people become aware of where to park and what the opportunities are. But that I think is new, so it's going to take us some time to get used to. How's the phone going? Are they calling very much? Are you getting some response?
There have been a lot of appeals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's mainly people that, I mean, some of them have been approved, but mostly it's people that just don't understand. So when we send out the denial or the approval, there's also information with what the ordinance is.
Right. And then we are working on more outreach as far as working with the Downtown Community Partnership and some of our other partners about the new enforcement, and uniform enforcement is really what we're talking about, so it doesn't change seasonally. So, does anybody else have anything for Vanessa on the reports?
No, it's always easy, Vanessa, when you have more income than the prior year, so it's easy to look at. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else from you?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks for your report.
Thank you.
Then the next item is from the Emergency Food Pantry for a request for a parking time zone change. I did drive by there, and that area is marked at 90 minutes, and that may be able to change. But Steve, do you want to come up and talk, or who wants to talk first? Okay.
Maybe as Stacy is coming forward, I'll just introduce the topic real quick. In your, as we were having discussion with Stacy last week and, looking at the 90-minute parking, our downtown and focus plan and some of our other parking plans have recommendations for, 4-hour or eliminating the time restrictions altogether as we, if we go back to our original concept of, Broadway being the hot spot and then kind of levels of, kind of regulations as you move outward. And so I just offer that up for consideration as you listen to Stacy's proposal.
Yep. And
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Stacy. You do a great job over there, and thanks for all the volunteers. But there was a abandoned tire warehouse that wasn't doing anything good. You guys turned it into something really good, so thank you.
You're welcome, and I'd say thank you. I wasn't at the pantry at that time, so I do want to just introduce myself, Stacy with the Emergency Food Pantry, and today I'm joined by 2 board members, a fellow staff member, and 4 volunteers. And so, they're kind of some of the internal stakeholders who knew about the kind of a crisis we felt like we were going through in the last couple of weeks. And I think I want to back up just a bit. I know that not everybody saw the short letter that I sent, but I also want to put another perspective and some history to it. Over 10 years ago, I chose that neighborhood to be my home. And so I think when we talk about it, it is my home. It's not just my work life. It's also the 7,000 families that come into that community each year to get food baskets. And so those are kind of the perspectives that I think are important as we go through and talk about this. Right now, we are open Monday through Friday, and we have a morning shift and an afternoon shift. And many volunteers are just coming in for part of the day. They're scheduled for those 2 segments. And many are there within under 4 hours. In a few minutes, I'll talk about having gone through some of the citations and warnings of how that may impact if it does stay at a 4-hour zone. So in general, we have 4 staff. Typically each shift we have about a dozen volunteers that are working. And each day we have about 70 households come in and out. So our current parking lot that's on the east side of the building is about 15 spots. Quick math tells us that empties and fills up about 4 or 5 times a day. About 2 years ago, so I started 4 years ago, and about 2 years ago I said, gosh, we're really getting to have a struggle here. Can volunteers please park on the street? At that time I believed that it was a 4-hour zone that hadn't been changed with the signage. And just this past week I did learn that it did go through a study when there were businesses in that area that that time had chosen to stay 90 minutes. And so on Thursday, November 7th, we started to get warning tickets, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is something we need to start thinking about, at least currently. And then a week later, at least 1 parking ticket was issued. was instantly talking to the city planners, instantly talking to Interstate, saying, you know, what can we do? This is a topic that we've been talking about for years. Last year, we actually added 3 additional parking spots to the west side of the property on the alley, knowing that we at least have an opportunity for staff who need to be in the area for a longer time, that we are gonna be able to supply that. In addition, with all the construction that will be starting, including right across the street, the antique building is empty at this time. We know there's going to be congestion. We've already been talking to neighbors about some of those different opportunities. So I think this isn't something that we've just kind of been letting sit. I think we've been proactive, but to have tickets start happening immediately was time consuming. And it really put a lot of people in crisis. So when I wrote the letter, you know, my first thought is that 4-hour zone. My other thought is in that neighborhood of those 4 or 5 blocks, most of them don't have any time restrictions at all. I think with those different perspectives that I bring, I understand we need it to be fair. It's street parking, it's available to anybody, but it does create a lot of difficulties and tension. You know, for families coming in, they've got literally grocery carts full of food. Having them in the street, emptying their food into their cars, I don't think is the answer. So we really are just looking for a reasonable way to think about how we can accommodate the different uses that are happening at that time. I'm just pausing for a moment if there was anything else I wanted to mention. And as Nicole said, you know, you've looked at the different types of parking, parking options. Over here on 4th Street, it's a 4-hour zone. If you look to 8th Street, just south of Main, it's the old DeLandrese's building at that corner. That's another 4-hour zone. So I think those are some places, you know, not far, kind of the fringe of downtown, that has those similar parking spaces. Do you have any questions for me at this time?
Yeah, so thanks, and I did drive through and saw that you have some off-street parking, but when you have 70 customers, the employee parking and volunteer parking is certainly an issue. And I think it's a good discussion as far as, you know, a 90-minute to 4-hour. But have you worked at all with the Cooper House at all and the FHA, Fargo Housing Authority, to see if they have quite a few spaces, and I'm wondering if there's a way that there might be a way to at least share some for employee parking. Have you had any discussions with them?
We have, and they've been brief. Over, like I said, the last 2 years, we've really thought about the bread company, Cooper House, places south of us. We've really been some really interesting ideas this week brainstorming, which might not be feasible, but at the time, it was a pretty strong no. You know, I think we have a concerted effort to have those conversations by spring again, because we know that that's going to be construction. We know food trucks are going to have difficulty coming in and delivering food to us, as well as clients. I mean, if we think of just the food and the clients, it's going to be difficult. So I do plan to have those same conversations again. I think what I'm looking for is, let's give us a little more space and to be able to get to when we know that construction is going to be an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. It's about helping to manage the on and off street parking areas, and we're really trying to work with private industry to also share some of those resources. Sometimes they're just not used as much as they could be. We've learned that even from our own parking lots when we brought interstate parking in. We're able to manage and use those spaces more efficiently. And so it's just, thanks for reaching out to them, and I think it'd be great if you could again. So anybody have any more questions for Stacy? I know, Austin, your concerns, you have some buildings over there. What's your thought about the parking area there?
Well, it's a challenging area because there's a lot of on-street parking, or I should say a lot of people that park on street. Our building nearby has about 111 stalls and 94 housing units, but then that means guest parking is on the street. And what was the rationale that it was changed from 90 minutes or 4 hours to 90 minutes? Was it to help with congestion?
So officially, it never was changed. Officially, it stayed at 90 minutes. It was something that I was told when I began the position, and there was a 2015 study, if I remember correctly. At that time, they chose to keep it at 90 minutes. And I can just say, as living there over a decade and watching the different buildings come in, most of the corner that we're talking about, north of Cooper and east of the pantry, is clients, is volunteers, couple of NDSU students, and occasionally we kind of are able to tell who the overnight guests are. But even during the day, that really isn't impacting. You know, it usually is a handful of people who are, you know, connected in some way to the pantry's mission, until things change, you know, if there becomes services or businesses in that area. But if you think about the density of the apartment buildings, I don't see that happening.
Right. So Austin's pretty new to Parking Commission too, but when we started to vary the time zones, really, it's like I said, that's the way that we manage those off-street resource, on-off-street resources, but time zones for the on-street resources. We didn't know, and they're very adaptable, and so it's kind of fluid. So it was, when we started this, we did more 90-minute zones than 2 and 4 hour zones, because part of the rationale I remember at the time was we had 3,500 students coming downtown, and they can park there all day in some spaces, and that was not good for the neighbors. We have some of those issues up in NDSU. So it's kind of like being a little more restrictive on the front end and seeing what happens. Are the students highly using this? You know, is it turning over for the neighbors? So it's really kind of an analysis. So part of it is you find out by how things go and what's happening. So things change. So you get a new development, you get new you know, residential units, and now you have another project coming up. Things are going to change again. So we want to be adaptable and have open communication. So that's, you're doing everything exactly right.
Well, thank you. And then, as I mentioned in the letter, you know, my first thought was the 4 hours. And since then, that some people have said, gosh, other nonprofits have gotten this special parking permit where even though it says a certain time zone, you can stay later. I know we have 3 to 6 volunteers that are there longer than 4 hours. And on the day where we had gotten a citation, so it was, I apologize, November 14th, I basically said, all volunteers, be cautious. You're going to get, you know, you're going to get tickets. Many people said they would either stop volunteering or leave early, and 2 actually did. So on the one day where we're like total crisis, where are people going to park? People stayed about, you know, just under an hour and a half, and they left. And these are dedicated volunteers who've been there 3 or more years. So it's not maybe somebody who was just trying us out to see if they really like the mission. And so between potential, you know, parking permits, we've learned that some businesses are also even downtown able to get tags on their window to stay longer, or just maybe there's a couple spots because we do have some dedicated volunteers that are there longer than 4 hours. And I believe Steve wanted a couple minutes too at the podium if that's.
Sure. I think Randy has a question.
Oh, please.
Yeah, Stacy, you know, your recommendation is for 4 hour zone, so that's really what I was looking at here. And so this, Nicole, fits into probably the requirements or the thoughts that we had when we initially set up the 4 hour zone. And so certainly there's always a lot of ideas, and but maybe, you know, this is just something that was overlooked and wasn't done, and we should just approve the 4 hour right now. Let's see how that works for you.
Sure.
And if you can always come back, you can always send us another letter. We can all talk about it again. But you know, that's where I'm at with this. It's really the same requirements that we had for all the other ones, and they seem to work in all those areas. Anything more than that, it seems to me, you might, because there's a lot of housing in the area, you'll have a lot of people parking overnight and then leaving their cars the next day. And so that may become a problem, but if we could at least start with the 4 hour parking program, we could see how it goes.
So, yeah, and Stacy, anything more, or do you want to hear from Steve?
No, just thanks for your expertise and for your considering how that's impacting
Yeah,
the mission.
Stacy, you might find out though that there are more businesses around there, and more of their employees are going to start to park in these areas. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, and we can always take a look at it again if that were to happen.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
Steve, egghead number 1. So he's in charge of the eggs, so that's his working nickname as a volunteer. I love it.
Is what?
Egghead number 1.
I won't use that name in addressing you.
I don't care, everybody else does. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Striggy, and my address is 3243 37th Avenue South. I'm a volunteer at the Emergency Food Pantry, but not an official representative here today. These comments are my own, but are also reflective of other volunteers with whom I visited about this matter. I'll start with a basic question, and that is, what problem is being solved by making this change to enforcement of the 90-minute parking limit on 11th Street beside the food pantry? The fact is that this change creates problems for the pantry and volunteers. And without volunteers, there is no food pantry. I typically work at the pantry 6 to 7 hours, 3 days a week. They call me egghead number 1 because I handle the eggs, about 17,000 dozen each year. That tells you the scope of the help the pantry provides. If you enforce a 90-minute limit, you will drive away many volunteers, very many. I'm not going to drive 11 miles through city traffic to work 90 minutes, a fourth of that setting up and cleaning up my work area. A 4-hour limit helps many volunteers, but not those of us who work 5, 6, or 7-hour shifts. Again, what problem are you trying to solve by enforcing the limit that's now there? If you enforce the limit, that will make access to the maintenance and removal on the street, snow removal, easier because there will be few of us parked there. A 4-hour limit doesn't help those functions. Volunteers who work a morning or afternoon shift will be parking there anyway. I'm told that the food pantry has been at its current location for 7 years, and the current way of handling the parking has been done that way all the time. Now, Stacy said it was started out 4, so I wasn't there at that time. But 3 old sayings come to mind. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And leave well enough alone. And let sleeping dogs lie. Other volunteers and I don't want to cut back on our work hours. We're there because we want to be of service. So please don't make it more difficult for us to do that. You've expanded the enforcement area. Please shrink it back down to what it was in that area. Thank you for listening, and I'll try to respond to any questions.
Thanks a lot, Steve, and I did get your letter, and Steve and I have testified out at the legislature before, and you can tell he's good at it. But I want to thank the volunteers. I also thank you for your testimony. I think that, as I said earlier, really what we're trying to do is just manage the resources. There's on-street parking, there's off-street parking, there's opportunities for shared parking with private-public relationships. We've had some success with that in some areas. That's why I mentioned Cooper House. I'm not putting it on to Cooper House, but the things that we're trying to do is if, let's say for like Randy's point, if we didn't have any time zones there at all, it may be a double-edged sword where there'd be less parking available for you on those areas if people just poach there, which means park there all day. They may leave an abandoned vehicle there. So, and same, once they're discovered, these niches where parking, you can park all day, the demand goes way up. So I think that at least for now, to some sort of a time zone to help manage the area and see how it is and see how we can do with, again, seeing if there's other opportunities to also improve the availability for parking for volunteers. I think that's a good time to do that right now. But thanks for your testimony.
Right now, the volunteers understand that the 90-minute limit is not enforced, that they can park out there and don't have to worry about it. And but the other people who come by probably don't know that, so they would respect that limit. It was ironic that a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine came in to volunteer, and he said, well, there's a 90-minute limit on the street. And I said, well, don't worry about it, park out there. They don't enforce that. Well, that day when I got ready home, here was a warning citation on my windshield that it was the first time. Then about a week later, or several days later, I got a real citation. Stacy took care of that somehow, and maybe she called you, Mike.
Vanessa.
Anyway, I invite all of you to come over to the pantry and see what goes on over there. And you might even find out how to get the title of egghead number 1.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak? Come on up. Sure, come on up to the podium, please.
Good morning, I'm Debbie Tite. I'm a former North Fargo resident of 39 years and just have moved to South Fargo, and I'm still here.
Good for you.
I have been a volunteer at the food pantry, I think 6 or 7 years, and I love it. And my question is, I'm sensing that you may be approving the 4-hour zone, which would be great. If a volunteer is there longer than that, and they need to go out and move their car, how far away do they have to relocate in order to be in compliance with the ruling?
So the way the reparking ordinance works, as far as I understand, is the block face. So if you're on one side of that, okay, so say you're on 11th Street and you're on the east side and you move over to the west side, that would be reparking. So that wouldn't work.
That would be reparking, so that wouldn't be allowed.
But you could go up to Fifth Avenue and park there, and that would not be reparking. So that you just don't want to be on that same stretch, on that same block face, and just move from one side of the street to the other, or one spot on that street to the other. That's how that reparking thing works. So if you're gonna move to a different,
Street.
well, a different block face, it goes block by block.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to say is that, as you might assume, many of us are retired. Some have physical disabilities. And so for them to have to go out and move their car after 90 minutes is difficult for some people, as well as possibly discouraging some people, which has already been said. So thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. We hadn't had bylaws to speak of, and I think this is a really good start. You want to take it away, Nicole?
Yeah, so I believe you've, last month we had it as a lay-down item, and then we have the proposal in front of you. We did not hear from any commission members for recommendations for edits other than from Jay Krabanoff. He did kind of suggest maybe a alternate be an NDSU person or somebody related to, kind of some of the parking components. And if we go back to the history of the Parking Commission, we used to have some more interaction, I would say, with NDSU facilities folks. But personally, as a staff person, I do like your suggestion on what we talked about last month as Commissioner Pepcorn maybe being that alternate, since he's not currently a voting member and he's generally here. I think we can, I guess staff's recommendation is we can leave that generic in the bylaws, and then at that appointment time with the mayor and the city commission's office, fluctuate that as the desire of the board and commission, and the availability of alternate folks.
Yeah, and so, on various other boards that I've been on, alternates kind of, and it's really nice to find people that have a connection. So NDSU is a good one, but the other part of this and what we talked about is that Commissioner Pepcorn is our liaison and he's here for most of the meetings. So it may be both, and I think that's what you're speaking about. So I'm not sure what the terminology would be. Maybe it'd be just that the commissioner mayor would make an appointment for a designated alternate, and that Commissioner Pepcorn, when there's a lack of a quorum, could be enabled to vote in that regard, something to that effect. Do you think that could work?
Yeah, I think that would be just great, and especially in the case where lack of quorum is maybe unexpected or kind of a last minute thing that tends to help. We have a couple of our other boards that use alternates as well, and it's sometimes hard to know 24 hours in advance if you need an alternate. And so usually we suggest our alternate to come to the meetings on a regular basis. That way they just they can keep up with the conversation as well as it exists.
Right. And then I have a question for the downtown partnership is, what do you guys think about having a member? I mean, you guys are in a lot of meetings already, but I think it would be helpful, but I also know you don't necessarily, it's any of your members, so it isn't necessarily staff. So maybe you want to just come up and talk about it a little bit.
Well, good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm Melissa Rademacher with the Downtown Community Partnership. I think it's really important. Parking Commission, and that's why we attend on a regular basis, and we speak about parking quite often. So I think it would be wonderful to have someone a part of it. I mean, Austin is part of our DCP board, but it's always great to have more voices and perspectives.
Right. So, Nicole, was the idea not necessarily, is it to have some member of the DCP as an appointed member? Or is it, that's one of the options?
Again, I think one of the options, these bylaws can be amended anytime. Typical practice is we bring them to you once a year for, any just double checks or refreshing. And we did communicate with Melissa and her team, about recommendations this time around. And I think also the way we appoint volunteers has changed under the direction of the currently sitting city commission, and the way that methodology processes, and this is probably good for the public record, is we tend to put an advertisement out, and it used to be, we had to really struggle to kind of word of mouth reach out, and now with social media and advertising, press releases, communication, we do some heavy advertisement when there is a vacancy so that we can kind of open that pool. And then I think we had a number of, and I'll just point to Austin, and we, since he's our newly seated member, we did have a number of applicants. We then forward that to the mayor and the sitting city liaison member, and they either do some individual interviews and kind of reach out and make those suggestions moving forward. So I think a couple questions too would be, if you don't believe 5 members is enough, you can always expand that board. I will guide that the larger the board gets, the harder it is to find quorums. But yeah, I think you can keep it, to answer your initial question, I think you can keep it pretty open here and decide on a year-by-year basis how you'd like to address that.
Sure. So one of the other things was about excused absences. So the idea is we have had an issue with some members that haven't been able to make the meetings. So I think the gist of it is if you find that you're too busy to do it, then we'll find a way to find another person. That's really what we're trying to do. Is that right?
Yes. If you look on the second page of the bylaws, we do have, and this is pretty common practice for all of our boards, in the event a member has 3 unexcused absences within a calendar year, the commission, by majority vote of the remaining members, may recommend the termination of the appointment of said member to the Board of City Commissioners. That sounds probably a little bit more strict than we actually enforce, but it's good, and there is a case-by-case situation where someone might have an illness or a family issue or things like that, but at least to have that general governing component helps with, we have our city commission is very strongly advocating all of our boards fully attend all the time, and I know in years past that's been maybe a little bit more casual, but we do, the liaison commissioners all like to see those fully active boards because there are so many members from the community. I think we had, in Austin's case, probably a good 20 applications, and so there are people that are interested in filling these seats.
Right. So we could make a motion today, but I don't know that there's any hurry. Maybe do we want to just wait till the next meeting and then you can make the changes as far as Commissioner Pepcorn, or should we just amend this and go ahead and?
Well, and I think you have here, the commission shall consist of 5 members and 1 alternate to be appointed for 3-year terms by the mayor and subject to confirmation by the city commission. If you like any of that, and then so appointed members shall be one of the following: downtown community partnership member, downtown property owner, downtown business owner who is not a property owner, representative from a downtown nonprofit organization, a representative user of downtown parking systems. So if you don't feel that's specific enough, we can take those edits and.
I actually do. I was just thinking that if we want to have a contingency for commissioner, the liaison commissioner to be able to vote in absence of a quorum, that might be a good addition, because I don't see that in there.
Yeah, so that's the alternate to be appointed.
Well,
So Commissioner Pepcorn, we would, so maybe just to make sure I'm
Okay,
clear,
yep.
what we would do from this point forward, given your direction, is bring Commissioner Pepcorn's name to the mayor and then add that to city commission as an alternate voting member.
And I was thinking that we would have a designated alternate and that the liaison commissioner would be a backstop. That
Okay.
in the absence of a quorum, he would be able to cast a vote. And, so I don't, that again, it's just, I think, giving us more options, even say we do have a designated alternate, and we
Chairman.
still don't have a quorum.
I think we should accept this for right now because we have nothing.
Yeah.
And this would at least give us an alternate
a good point.
to start with. And so if it takes some time
Yeah.
to get this resolved, at least we have this and
I
we
think
can have a
that's good
quorum
point.
each
Yep.
week.
And Commissioner Pepcorn has stated that, he thinks that's a good idea, but that's, like I said, we can add that or clarify that. Because right now, it's not excluded, it just isn't pointed out.
Sure.
So I think I agree with what you're saying.
I would make a motion to
Can I have
accept.
one more suggestion real
sure.
quick? Just to point out, under meetings, so we do have it stated under regular meetings, the commission shall meet on the last Thursday of each month at 9:00 a.m. And if the regular meeting date falls on a holiday when the city governing officers are generally closed, and I'll just let you read the rest of that sentence. But I think this is also a good time on an annual basis to confirm, this day of the week and day of the month and time of day is good. We can make those adjustments like we did today on a as-needed basis and as upon availability. But the more we can standardize, as you can see, we have a good, 15 staff members that support the Parking Commission. And so those kind of adjustments, and for the public to know that there's a regular thing. And we're good about that. So I just wanted to, though, make sure this is the opportunity that if we need to adjust that time back to the 8:00, or maybe think about that and we can poll the rest of the members. Just wanted to kind of point that reference.
Well, let's poll the members we have here anyway. Randy, is that,
Well, it works for me because that's how you got me on here. It's because I'm gone a lot and I can, the last Thursday or Friday of the month, I always can schedule myself in. And because I'm in the bar and restaurant business, I'm out quite late. So 9:00 is really good for me. That's why it was done. So, and I accepted.
how about you, Austin?
9's better, but
9's better?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's typically when we do meet, so I think that's what's listed here. Again, I think we could make a motion.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to accept the bylaws, rules, and procedures as written.
Do we have a second?
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 And then is there any other business from anybody? We got the Parade of Lights coming up next Tuesday. And, okay. Anything else?
Nope.
I actually do have something to say about the Parade of Lights.
Sure.
So yesterday at our downtown task force meeting, we talked about the parking implications around that day. And so I think it's important to point out that starting at 3 p.m. on Monday, November 25th, signage will be posted along 2nd Avenue North and along the parade route. So on 2nd Avenue North, there'll be no parking on November 26th between noon and 9 p.m. And along the parade route, there'll be no parking on November 26th between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. And additionally, along the parade route, if you are parked after 4 p.m., you may be towed.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I would make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Who done?